The man found guilty of shooting and hurting 2 people in Quincy last September is behind bars tonight after getting his sentence today. Dyrece Knaff II was sentenced to 22 years for 2 counts of aggravated battery with a firearm. WGEM's Robbie Tucker joins us live at the Adams County Courthouse with more on the sentence he faces. Robbie, what can you tell us?
Well, Olivia, Knaff will have to serve 85% of that sentence, a little less than 19 years, with credit for 240 days already served. Now, Knaff was also sentenced to 10 years for 2 counts of aggravated discharge of a firearm, but that time will be served concurrently. He could have received 6 years, but Judge Charles H.W. Birch found that to be too lenient. Many of Knaff's family members and friends were in attendance and say they feel the punishment doesn't fit the crime and maintain Knaff was acting in defense of his brother.
City of Quincy, they just set precedent that mobs can go to your house, attack your family, and you defend your family and you get in trouble. That's what pretty much this case is boiled down to.
Knaff spoke on his own behalf and apologized for his actions, but prosecutors claimed Knaff was not remorseful. In a monitored video call presented by the state, Knaff made statements and gestures that could be interpreted as threats of future violence.
A 15-year sentence would have been an appropriate sentence if that's what a judge would have done. A 20-year sentence would have been appropriate. But after seeing and hearing that, I absolutely did not think that a 15-year sentence was appropriate. I felt as though something higher was appropriate and was the right decision in order to send the message, especially since you're having a defendant who did not show any remorse whatsoever.
Eyler says he believes the sentencing sends a message to the community that gun violence won't be tolerated in Quincy. After Knaff serves his sentence, he will be subject to 18 months of additional monitoring. Reporting live in Quincy, Robbie Tucker, WGEM News.
Thank you, Robbie. You can find more coverage of the trial on our website at WGEMnews.com.